Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. I have a really cool episode coming up. It's near and dear to my heart. You know, a lot of companies look at how do you take the top 10%, right? The companies focus on what is the top 10%. And those are the people that we consistently just keep going after and try to put more top 10% in. And we manage from that point forward. And in theory, it definitely works. I mean, you can see that traditionally it works. But what if we flip that model on its head? What if we said, look, we got our top 10%. How do we take the bottom 90% and make them into the top 10%? What if we could do that? What if we could increase the bottom 90% and drive it up so the productivity is equal to or surpasses the top 10%? What would happen to revenues? Well, the reason I brought this lady, Yamini Bhat, right? She has a company that she developed a software that actually does this. And it tracks all of the sales people's activities on an individual basis and provides data intelligence. Now, we're going to talk about how you bring the bottom up to the top, because you already have the bottom. The problem is many companies, they're managing just by top line revenue or top line numbers. And they're not looking at the optimization points within a sales team, or what got the person who's doing the top 5% versus what's the top 5 versus the top 10%, right? They're not looking at the incremental, what's the different playbooks that they're actually using, or the person who's at 50% versus the person at 5%. They're not really looking at how do they get that person to mimic those particular behaviors throughout. So we're going to talk about this because it's so important to not only raising revenue, but raising profit, because you're already paying base salaries. You're already paying these type of things out to your sales team. What if we could double their productivity and do it in a quick period of time? So without further ado, let's go talk to Yamini now. Yamini, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Doug. I'm excited to be here.
And you are in India, correct? At this moment?
Yes, in Bangalore.
And your company is worldwide. You have offices in the United States, and the West Coast, the East Coast, and in other places.
Yes, we're headquartered in the US, and we have offices in about 6 different countries.
That's awesome. And you have a really, I think a really cool backstory, which I'd like to get into. But we're going to do this on modeling the behaviors of the top 10%, right? And instilling those in the bottom 90% of sales teams for growing and creating a bottom-up growth, if you will. So I find that really unique, because a lot of times people focus on the top, right? They focus on the top, but they forget about the whole bottom of the process. So you've kind of reversed that whole scenario, and you find bringing from the bottom up makes a lot of sales growth. Why don't you, how did this come about? I mean, this is really interesting.
Yeah. So I used to work at McKinsey before this for about 5 years, and most of my work was on sales transformation. This was with large enterprises with, on an average, more than 5,000 sellers distributed across the country. And typically, we were relying on systems like the CRM to have some form of information on what sales activities were. And we really struggle because it's very less used, and you have less than 10% salespeople logging into the CRM to update what they've done. And most sales leaders work on the back of playbooks that they expect the team to be compliant around, right? Like how many calls, what kind of customers, engagement patterns with these customers, etc. to be able to drive the outcomes that they envision on either new customer acquisition or expansion with an existing customers. The challenge that we faced was that we just didn't know on the ground what compliance against these playbooks look like. And then we would rely on either experienced sellers telling us what their playbooks were, which was very anecdotal, because if I was to tell what I do with my day, I would assume I was doing 8 meetings a day every single day. But the average is not like that for me, right? So this was not really backed by data. And the second challenge we faced was that any transformation had to be driven very top down. And in a 5-10,000 salespeople team, that's really a challenge, because any week, you're only as strong as the weakest link. And it takes incredible amount of time. But then if you look at salespeople, every salesperson is motivated by by wanting to do more, because it directly impacts how much they take home, and that's the reason they are salespeople. And what they would really value is continuous guidance on what can help them achieve more commissions, right? For example, that doesn't reach them in time and in a format that is useful for them. So salespeople would love to get help, but not by being monitored and managed on activity. But management just has no way to manage a 5,000 people sales team any other way, right? So that was a disparity I noticed, and people were willing to pay McKinsey millions of dollars to be able to solve some of these problems. But my strong belief was that technology is the right way to learn what the best sellers do and translate those into next best actions for every single person to mimic, right? And therefore improve the average behavior.
So why? Because I was in an organization with large sales teams, and I was part of those sales teams. And absolutely, what you said, we don't want to be managed that way, right? I mean, it's restrictive. I remember people coming in, management coming in, and we're gonna bring in, I think it was Oracle or one of those, right? It was like, and we want you to put every little detail in this system and every little thing and and my brain went, heck no, that ain't happening, because like that's just going to slow me down, right? And so this is how they wanted to manage from the managerial point, but they never looked at it from the sales point. Why do you think organizations, when they get larger like that, especially large organizations, why is it forced that that's all that they can do?
Yeah. So I had this conversation with one of the one of the business unit leaders of one of the top 10 banks in the world. And he was one of the founding team members, and he said, hey, when we were 100 sellers, we would do 30 times more than what our average RM today does, and we would do it fairly easily, not with the kind of friction that we are seeing today. And every year when we chose to grow by 100% and then 50% and then 20%, even at that scale, even after becoming one of the top 10 banks in the world, they grow by 20% to 30% every year, right? So even at that scale, when they set those targets, their typical method of building leverage is by hiring a 20-30% larger sales team. But with every percentage increase in the size of the sales team, the productivity is going down by 5 percentage points on an average, right? So it's just not scaling. And his story on, with 100 sellers, we were doing 30 times more per seller. And with that, we're doing 3% per seller of what we used to before, right? It's such a sad story that you just can't scale by throwing people at the problem, right? Or at the opportunity. And there's a lot more that needs to happen. And the difference is when you're a 100-member or even a 10-member seller team, it's so easy to know every seller's behavior, what their choke point is, and be able to guide them on every conversation if need be on a daily basis. And most probably the managers at that point are some of the best early managers, right? You have very strict control on who gets into those roles. And that keeps getting diluted as you grow. Technology helps you mimic a good sales coach on a continuous basis. And technology also can observe your activity, learn from it, and give you guidance without you having to spend an hour a day updating everything that you've done for a report for your boss, right? So decreasing productivity, dramatically decreasing productivity, the increasing scale is a very, very core issue for any large enterprise. And there's no top-down way to drive transformation at that scale.
Do you also, I almost don't want to ask this question because I can see lawyers lining up when I'm going to ask this question now. You take these initial CRM systems, like, they have the word sales in them or whatever. I've used these things and I found them extremely cumbersome and very, very non-productive, right? But they seem to be the large standard of what's going on. But I heard you say something really critical, which is data. And we haven't even told the audience here what you do yet, but the data will drive the story. But these large systems, I never found to capture data, which is telling the real story.
Yeah.
And I can remember when I was utilizing these larger systems, I mean, my sales team members, we just throw anything in there, right? Just because it was just like, they just wanted to see these numbers or whatever. So we just pop it in there. I mean, I remember I threw the president of the United States name in there one time to see if they'd pick it up, and they never did. Right. So, and then I was putting people like Oprah Winfrey in there because I was the top sales guy in the company. So I knew I could get away with this stuff, but it was just, no one ever looked at the details.
Yeah. Yeah. So unfortunately, I mean, the most fastest growing CRM is still built on an architecture that's 3 decades old.
Yeah.
So great that it helped everyone move to cloud, and that's fantastic, and made databases available, customer data sets available on a web login, which is fantastic. But the same users have also moved way past just cloud and web, right? Everyone is mobile. You spend 2-3 hours a day on your phone. It goes wherever you go. Most of your activity is probably happening on your phone. And then you're expected to go log in somewhere on a web interface and fill up forms, right? Nobody lives in a form world anymore. Like, you don't need to fill a form to order food. You don't need to fill a form to move from point A to point B. You don't need to fill a form to like book a flight and get somewhere, or even book an entire vacation, right? So forms is extremely outdated, and unfortunately, the most popular CRMs still are very form-based, right? And you're right, smart salespeople can easily fill junk and get away with it. And people who are non-performing can happily fill data that can run you in circles, right? I can easily report 5 meetings a day. What about it, right? So there's nothing really you can glean from that will help you move the needle. And even in spite of that, even if everyone diligently spent an hour a day to fill up everything correctly, the CRM is still only reporting a summary of average activities per day. It's not reporting what did a seller do to have 95% renewal rate versus an RM who had only 70% renewal rate, right? And without answering that question and feeding that back as a nudge to the seller who can improve, it's useless. You're now counting on a headquarters team to glean insights, create a playbook, and then mandate change top down. Right? Every seller would nod when I say, hey, you know what? If you get in touch with your customer 45 days before, you have not just a 90% renewal rate probability, but you probably can upsell by 20-30%. Right? Everyone would say, oh my God, that totally makes sense. But for a wealth manager handling a portfolio of 500 customers, they're not going to remember when T minus 45 days is for their 500 customers. It's impractical. So how are you helping them? And that becomes the core of what any intelligent sales engagement platform should do. And that is a completely different mandate from a CRM's mandate, which is just to give an easy way to pull and push info data.
So if I understand correctly, you have a company, it's called Vymo. Vymo is a intelligent sales engagement platform.
Yes.
That means it looks at each individual salesperson as an individual, tabulates data on that salesperson, cross compares this to the top, say 10% of what they're doing versus the bottom 90%, and gives that intelligence so that you can actually, the companies can actually coach and train on that.
Yeah, and not only do we give that intelligence to headquarters or the sales effectiveness teams, because it is a long cycle for them to convert those to playbooks and drive top-down transformation, right? We convert this intelligence into nudges So if I go with the previous example of, everyone agrees that you need to get in touch with the customer T minus 45 to 60 days before like renewal, right? We would translate that into, hey, Doug, you have 3 hours on your calendar. Here are 7 calls you could make. Couple of those recommendations are for customers who are coming up for renewal in the next 45, 50, 60 days, right? So we've made it extremely easy because I know you're on Outlook. I can see what your calendar looks like. It's integrated. You've connected Outlook into Vymo, right? You've connected your email communication, etc., so like your Zoom calls, etc., into Vymo. So I understand that here are 17 customers that you've not been in touch with in the last 3 months, and here are 7 of them who have very high potential based on other engagement that we've seen, or potentially coming up for renewal that you should prioritize, right? And these are 17 signals you would have completely missed or not prioritized if not for this nudge. And we're doing it now. We're not pulling into a room and telling you how to analyze your customer portfolio and how to plan your day. We are doing it real time and telling you, hey, you have 3 hours. Let's make the best of it, right? And we can even translate that into, there is a 90% probability this will happen, and that means a 90% probability you make $1,000 more in a week, right? So we can translate into exactly what it means for you, and exactly how to have that conversation with the customer, right? Including micro learning modules that you can go through before placing that call, etc. So it's meant to make a seller successful. And yes, there are insights that go to the head office, but by the time they read the insights, we've already moved the needle.
So I love this, and I'll tell you why. Firstly, we're speaking with Yamini. Hope I get the last name right. Bhat.
Yeah,
I got it right. Cool. And the company's called Vymo. It's at www.getvymo.com.
yes.
Check out that process, folks. Here's the reason I love what you're saying. I made my living for a long time as a consultant and doing sales optimization. I would have to manually go in and measure everything that you're talking about. And so I would go in and I would find things like 62% of their leads got stuck in stage 1, and the company would never know because they look at top line and they look at like, okay, we're making money, but if we moved them from stage 1 to stage 2, 38% of them closed every single time, right? Those type of things.
Yeah.
And so what I'm hearing is, we give the salesperson that intelligence so they can proactively go get this done before management goes, hey, what the heck? We brought Doug in there and he's telling us that 62% of the time you all ain't going from point 1 to point 2.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, if you solve that problem that you at stage 1, you're getting stuck, and here is how you can move the needle. And now you're going from 60% to 90% from stage 1 to stage 2. And then you're stuck at stage 2 for a different reason, because it's taking you 3 days after the stage 2 conversation to send a quotation out. And, that is a very different choke point. So how do you embed quotation into the same journey? So a seller can click and send, and then you move the needle on that. So the choke point now moves to stage 3, right? And so once you get through all the stages, the choke point might be sellers who are able to ramp up and not able to ramp up despite nudges, where you need an intervention. So is it a skill issue? Is it a will issue, right? When you solve that, you might actually need to unlock potential from your compensation and incentive plans, right? So in sales, the choke point always moves. And depending on systems that can help you manually capture data, analyze, and then trying to push insights top down, that takes you quarters and years. And like no one is able to drive that successfully. Productivity has only gone down with increasing scale, right? And having technology that can do this on a real time and make sure that it's nudging a seller on what they can do next. Like even a seller who's the top 10 in your team is getting nudged on something they could do differently. Whereas a seller who's in the bottom 10 is getting nudged on something very fundamental, but still getting nudged, right? So everyone is getting better continuously. One of our clients actually counted this and talked about how we do 1 million nudges a day. And there is no human intervention or change management method that can actually do that.
It's humanly impossible to do 1 million nudges a day. I mean, I've managed teams as large as 166 salespeople, it starts to get, which isn't a huge team, but it's still large enough that you can kind of know personalities here and there, but you lose it. I mean, it's just because you just so many things going on at one time. So what I love about what you're saying, because people might be going, well, when are we going to talk about how to get the 10% to the, the 90% to the 10%? So folks, listen up. It's called data, right? You're tracking data on a regular basis to promote accountability. And you're giving assistance in the form of nudges in this case. And then now your managers can coach, right? Because that's what they're supposed to do, grow their team's revenue and coach. I mean, that's really a manager's job. So many managers don't get it because they're not trained to do that, Yamini. But this accountability, what I have found is when they bring me into companies and I start even looking at this data, all of a sudden sales go up anyways, because they know I'm looking at the data. Right?
Yeah.
So salespeople by nature, and especially those who aren't on the top 10%, you said something earlier, which was salespeople are motivated to make more money because that's why they get into sales. And I agree with that. I also think there's and I love your feedback on this. I think there is a saturation point where people go, okay, I'm making enough at this point, and they sort of kick back. And then once they learn how to do that, they kick back on hours, like, hey, how do I make this kind of money in half the time? And the company is not seeking that most of the time. They're thinking, oh, well, okay, I'm paying this person large base salary. I'm paying this. I mean, let's make it more and more and more productive. Have you found that to be kind of the case as well? I have throughout my life that salespeople do that. Have you found that as well?
Yeah, so we've seen that. In fact, we've seen the top, I mean, not everyone, but within the top 5%, we've explicitly, and then we interviewed some of these power performers to understand why that was the case, because they would hit 120% and then they would not actually do any deals in the last 5 days of the month,
right?
Or the last 10 days, right? And you could easily see, like, if you had to do a straight line, you would have thought they would have hit 140% by the end of it. Some of it we've been able to unlock by having uncapped incentives on success. Right. And some of that has been unlocked, but then some of it is just persona, right? But what it gives you, Doug, anyway, is if these folks are able to do in 15 days or in half the number of hours spent, what an average seller is expected to probably do in 30 days, there is a lot of insights there on how their playbooks run that the others need to mimic.
Great point.
Right. So there is 1% of your sellers amongst the top performers who are actually kicking back and saying, I don't want to do more hours. I'm happy where I am. And in fact, I want to do the same. I want to make the same money in fewer hours. These are the ones who are designing the smartest playbooks for themselves. And if you can just get another 20% of your team to just mimic that by blind muscle memory that nudges can develop, you have a very different sales outcome from your team.
Wow. You just said something that I don't think people caught it. So I'm going to come back on it. Playbooks. Companies will develop a playbook. But what I just heard you say is at different levels of performance, individuals have their own version of their own playbook within the company's playbook.
Yeah.
Now, all of you who are listening, please take a pen or paper and digital. If you're driving, don't do this, please. But the reality on this is that if you're treating your whole team the same way, ubiquitous management across the board, you're leaving so much money on the table. And that's kind of the message I've been hearing you say, Yamini, through this whole conversation. So your top 10% or top 5%, they're going to use a maybe even just slightly different playbook than your bottom 50, your next 50% down.
Yeah.
And so if we can take that 50% down and get them just to mimic that top 5% behavior, sales will automatically and magically go up.
Yes. Yeah. And we've seen that happen. We've seen lead conversions go from like 0.4%, where marketing campaigns were on the verge of being shut down, to 7-8% overnight, just literally within overnight or within weeks or maybe a month at most, right? Because the system has picked these up and made sure that the choke points are systematically eliminated, right? We've seen cross-sell ratios go up similarly. We've seen partner-driven sales go up by 15-20% within 3 to 4 month periods. Right. And bottom-up transformation is powerful. And bottom-up transformation coming from, a cute app that has AI feels way less intrusive than a manager pushing you to just report your activity. Right. And there's a trust that gets. We have our end users on an average. We have about, with some of our top, largest customers, we have about 90% daily active usage compared to CRMs, which have 10% login every day.
Yeah.
And an average, and on Slack, the daily usage on Slack is about 40 to 50%, right? So it's 2 times of that on Vymo. And end users in Vymo spend about 58 minutes a day. An average daily user in Instagram spends 30 minutes a day, right? And these 58 minutes are not continuous. They come to Vymo 8 to 12 times in a day and spend 4 to 6 minutes each time. Right? So they come there, look at recommendations, go do those activities, have that meeting, have that conversation with the customer, come back, log that in, then look at what else we are suggesting on the basis of that, so on and so forth, right? So that's, since the day we started the company, daily active usage and user behavior on, seller behavior on Vymo as an app is something that we have tracked. And this is a metric we are extremely proud of, because we are able to hold these up across 8 different countries, 4 or 5 different international languages, including Japan and US, which are so different culturally, and across 300,000 users, 300,000 sellers, right? And sellers are, I believe, salespeople are some of the smartest and smartest, even in terms of gaming any process and system, right, within an organization. So having that kind of loyalty from salespeople is a huge matter of pride for us.
Well, and it's from a guy who's done this most of his life, it's a huge accomplishment, because the engagement level of salespeople. I always, salespeople don't yell at me, especially in social media here, but I always say salespeople have the memory capacity of a kitten, right? Because most of us do. And so to be able to hold that attention throughout the day is a monumental accomplishment, especially done on technology. And I agree with you. The worst thing that sales managers can do is call out salespeople in sales meetings on the data that they should be doing one-on-one, firstly. But if the system's already doing it, and then they can have an intelligent conversation about how to improve it, it's just a win-win all the way around.
Yeah.
How do people find out more about the company, the product, the service, whatever they're, because I imagine people are going, this is pretty cool. Let me figure out some next steps.
Definitely www.getvymo.com, right? GETVYMO.com. There's a lot of material there. You can write to us at hello@getvymo.com and we can schedule a demo. There is a bunch of case studies, customer testimonials that are on our website that can be useful resources to at least understand how we do this.
Excellent. I have one last question, because I know I've kept you a little longer than we said we would, and I appreciate you doing that. Capped, uncapped. When you said uncapped commissions or uncapped compensation, a lot of business owners are afraid to do that.
Yeah.
I have found that uncapping compensation plans is more motivating than capping plans. What's your thoughts and expertise on this? I should say, not even thoughts.
Yeah, depending on the product you're selling, as long as you're not adding incrementally new risk, like you're not taking on bad debt or bad insurance customers, etc. As long as you're selling within the risk profile that you are comfortable with, gross margins overall do get better at scale, right? So as long as your incentive plans are smartly aligned to a percentage share of the gross margin,
right? And
we've seen this behavior very often amongst the really top performers to whom sales comes easy, in fact, right? And it's really possible to unlock their potential by designing incentive. In fact, Vymo has a module where incentives can be designed and linked to activities, behaviors, and help in nudging sellers at the right time. We've seen two things which we did not think we would see, but we saw this happening over the last 2 years. One is uncapped incentive design schemes. And the second is we've seen in large sales teams, we've seen CXOs take a call not to set top-down targets, but to get sellers to input bottom-up targets that they wish to take on. Right after communicating uncapped incentives, they've asked their sellers to take bottom-up targets within a certain range, within a certain minimum range. And we've seen the bottom-up targets add up to way more than what top-down would have added up to. Right? And these two combined together have been very powerful in helping many of our customers really unlock something like 20 to 40% growth within certain lines of businesses.
Wow.
Within the year.
Well, Yamini, thanks so much for being on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. I really appreciate it. I know everybody listening is got their head spinning right now, so that's awesome. So thanks again. I'd love to have you back on another episode if you want to down the line. And I appreciate you getting on here because I know you weren't feeling well. So thanks for bringing your A game while you weren't.
I had a great time. Thank you so much, Doug. It was a pleasure talking to you and would love to come back anytime. Thank you.
Data. Did I say data too many times? Well, the reason I'm saying that is if you want to keep raising the bar, you look at the data. And why do you do that? Because the data tells a story. Now, data is one thing, but how do you put the data in play? You've got to do it proactively. So when you're measuring data, and if you take what her systems, the design of the system does, it measures that data and provides the intelligence and the accountability of the process. This is why you hire consultants. You bring them in to spot things that aren't working or spot things that are working and make them better, right? And therefore, you get everybody doing that activity and magically your numbers go up. Things smooth out many times, right? Operations get smoother. This is a win in all cases, but data. You got to have the data. Without the data, you're making subjective observations and subjective decisions. I think it's going to work this way. Let's try that. But what if the data said, heck no, don't go down that path because every time we do, we lose the deal 99% of the time. And that 1% that we close, we're not making money on that. Or worse yet, we do this 78% of the time, and the 22% we're not making any money on. If you have the data, you can look clearly at this and make objective decisions. And I cannot tell you how many times, but I can tell you it's hundreds of times that I've looked at data points within a company where things like the top 10% of their clientele is producing 90% of the revenue, and they're chasing targets that aren't mimicking the top 10%. So when we refocus on that, all of a sudden their numbers go up dramatically. Why? We had the data. So if we could do this on an individual salesperson level, and we can manage and coach on those levels, and we have something proactively doing that to help us, what a win-win. So if you love this subject matter, please let me know. If you have subject matter that you're an expert on, and you know somebody who's an expert, please let me know. Send an email into matter, M-A-T-T-E-R, at ceosalesstrategies.com. That is plural on strategies. And we'll respond to you. Maybe it's you, maybe it's someone else. If it makes sense for the show, we'll have you on. If you want to increase yourself or somebody, your company, people within your company, people you know, to the top 1% of earners and selling, I'm your guy. We're going to be rolling out a 1% university soon. And if you'd like to have more knowledge or information on that, if you'd like to know how to get involved in that, reach out to me, please, at Doug, D-O-U-G, at ceosalesstrategies.com. Until next time, go out and sell something, sell a lot of it, sell it profitably, play win-win, coach your people, right? Coach your people to play win-win. Make somebody's day happy by solving a problem or giving them a new opportunity through selling, through what you do, and they win and you win. Until next time, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast, asking you, if you like this episode, to please give it a 5-star review and to tell your friends about the podcast. The more people who listen to this, the more people we can help. I get lots of letters and people telling me how, this episode helped them get past this, or this helped them do that, or this increased their percentage of earnings by X. We love to hear those things. So keep them coming. Thank you for that. Go out and sell something as always. Make it today. Until next time, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. To your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.